Okay, we are live.
All right, the live stream
Okay.
is rolling. Sergeant Hope,
Okay.
Sergeant Hope, if you could start the cloud, thank you. And you may begin your opening statement.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good morning.
Thank
Welcome
you.
to the New York City Council Committee hearing on rules, privilege, and election. At this time, will all council members and council member staff, please turn on your videos. I repeat, council members and council member staff, please turn on your videos. Thank you. To minimize disruption, please place all electronic devices to vibrate or silent mode. Chair, we are ready to begin.
Okay, thank you. Good morning and welcome to the Committee on Rules, Privileges, and Elections. My name is Karen Koslowitz and I am Chair of the Committee on Rules, Privileges, and Elections. Before we begin this hearing, I would like to introduce the council members of this committee who have joined us today. Speaker Johnson will be joining us during the meeting, but we have now with us Minority Leader Steve Matteo, Council Member Adrian Adams, Council Member Margaret Chin, Council Member Debbie Rose. And right now, that's what we have. We're going to be joined by Mark Trey shortly. I would also like to acknowledge Rules Committee Council Lance, I'm going to screw up your name again. Polivi and the staff members of the council's investigative unit, Chuck Davis, Chief Compliance Officer, and investigators Andre Johnson Brown, Alicia Vassell, and Ramses Booten. Today, the Rules Committee will consider two matters. First, consideration of Rodney Pepe Savenir for reappointment to the position of Democratic Commissioner of Elections for Kings County. Second, certain committee changes. The committee changes includes dissolving the Standing Committee on the Justice System and transferring its jurisdiction to the Committees on Public Safety and General Welfare, and changes to the membership of certain standing committees and the Land Use Subcommittee on Zoning and Franchises. Should Ms. Pepe Savenir receive the advice and consent of the council, she will be reappointed to a 4-year term that will begin on January 1st, 2021 and expire on December 31st, 2024. Chuck Davis, our Chief Compliance Officer, has briefed all members of this committee regarding the contents of Ms. Pepe Savenir background investigation. The Board of Elections consists of 10 commissioners, 2 from each of the city's 5 counties. Each commissioner serves a term of 4 years or until a successor is appointed. Commissioners shall be registered voters in the county for which they are appointed and registered as a member of the political party for which they are nominated. New York Election Law, Section 3-204, subsection 1 states that at least 30 days before the first day of January of any year in which a commissioner of elections is to be appointed, the chairman or secretary of the appropriate party county committee shall file a certificate of party recommendation with the clerk of the appropriate local legislative body. New York Election Law, Section 3-204, subsection 4 states that commissioners of election shall be appointed by the county legislative body or in the city of New York by the city council. It is for this reason that the Rules Committee is considering this nomination today. The Kings County Board of Elections submitted a valid certificate of party recommendation to the city clerk on October 23rd, 2020. This was more than 30 days before the first day of January of a year in which commissioners are appointed. If the council as a whole does not act within 30 days of receiving a valid certificate of recommendation, the applicable political party conference within the council becomes empowered to approve the recommendation on its own. For example, A Democratic vacancy could be filled by a vote of the Democratic Party's conference, and a Republican vacancy would be filled by a vote of the Republican Party's conference. The board and its commissioners are responsible for the maintenance and administration of voting records and elections. The board also exercises quasi-judicial powers by conducting hearings to validate nominating petitions of candidates for nomination to elective office. The board is required to make an annual report of its affairs and proceedings to the council. Commissioners receive a $300 per diem for each day's attendance at meetings of the board or any of its committees, with a maximum of $30,000 per year. Welcome, Ms. Pepe Savenir. Would you please raise your right hand to be sworn in? Can we
Do
swear?
you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, would you like to make a statement?
Yes, I would. Thank you so much. Good morning, members of the Rules, Privilege, and Elections Committee. I am humbled and honored to be before this body as a candidate for the Democratic Election Commissioners representing Kings County for the 2021-2024 term. My name is Rodniel Pepe Souvenir, and I'm an attorney with over 20 years of experience who put herself through law school while being married and a mother of two. My parents, who were immigrants with a 5th and 8th grade education, instilled in me an appreciation of public service. To quote scripture, to whom much is given, much is required. My goal in law school was always public service, and as you can see by my resume, that is the path I pursued. I'm currently employed by the City University of New York as a University Title IX director, overseeing 25 campuses in their immediate response to allegations of sexual misconduct, along with instilling a sexual misconduct awareness program for CUNY students. When I considered the role of election commissioner, I first thought of my parents, who suffered the tyranny of a dictator where the right to vote was not honored or respected. It was important to them that I did not take that right lightly, and I exercised it at every election I was eligible to vote in. I also had the thought of the huge responsibility as an election commissioner of ensuring that everyone who was legally eligible to run for office or vote could. I recalled my days working in Georgia for the 2008 presidential election, making calls throughout the country, asking voters to vote, and on election day, serving as an election monitor at various polling sites throughout Atlanta, where I was often not welcome because of the color of my skin, but nonetheless there to ensure that voting was accessible to all, particularly to the disabled and the elderly who stood in the hot sun, determined to exercise their right to vote. I have been an election commissioner for approximately 1 month. Although one could say it was a baptism by fire, it was exciting. I realized this was an election cycle I may never see again in my lifetime. I attended my first public meeting with the other commissioners, and 4 days later, early voting began. I set out to visit polling sites, which I did throughout the weekend. I wanted to see how the poll sites were being run, ensuring that the voters were having a good experience and to see that the poll workers were staying safe. I was buoyed by the iconic New York venues, understanding the need to allow everyone to vote safely by opening such venues as the Barclays and King's Theater in Brooklyn as a voting site. This meant that the community was willing to work with us to think creatively about the voting process and how to make it more accessible. I came to understand that having safe voting sites was not only based on the Board of Election, but it was a partnership with the community and venues that agreed to allow the Board of Elections to use their space. As I observed the poll sites, I would direct line managers to accompany the elderly, disabled, pregnant women, and families with children to the head of the line so they would not have to stand too long. Surprisingly, in some cases, where a senior citizen was off the line so as not to have to wait, they often refused. They wanted to experience the standing and proudly voting in such an important election. In a more compact poll site, I directed that the poll workers ensure that people were appropriately socially distance. In one polling site, when I was alerted that voters had issues understanding directions due to language, I directed that they transfer poll workers who spoke that language to that site to add comfort and provide directions to voters in a language that they understood. In another poll site, I asked that porta potties be placed there for seniors on the line. I was inspired, exhilarated, and the voters' determinations to vote and the yeoman's job that the poll workers were doing. On election day, I traveled to polling sites. I spoke to poll workers and voters alike, ensuring all was well. I visited as many polling sites as I could. I even assisted voters. I later went to the Brooklyn voting machine facility where the polls when the polls closed, and observed the police escorts of the return of poll pads, machines, and all the ballots back to the facility. I watched and I spoke to the overnight workers gathered to unload and to begin the process of accounting for all the voting related materials. I didn't return home until 2 a.m. I was exhausted, but it was worth it. I'm encouraged by the fact that the New York legislators have been keeping their eye on the goal of creating an accessible system with early voting, and most recently having passed legislation that would allow persons, as long as they are eligible, to be automatically registered to vote upon completing various municipal forms, such as a driver's license or health forms at a local hospital. Absentee ballots being counted without a postmark 1 day after election day, as long as it is received in the Board of Elections office and date stamped the day after election day. I'm learning, and I recognize there is more work to be done at the Board of Elections, such as making the voting process language accessible for those where English is not their first language. While there is early voting, locating more early voting sites that is ADA compliant and accessible, making all voters aware of early voting sites or the times of operations. Most importantly, having adequate poll workers who are trained and competent, allowing for the voting process to run smoothly. In my short tenure as an election commissioner, I have come to understand the huge undertaking of ensuring voters can vote. My focus is to ensure that the election process is fair, equitable, and accessible to all candidates and voters in Brooklyn. I'm committed to working with my fellow commissioners to uphold our election laws, follow procedures, and to make changes that will enable the election process to work for the people. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a few questions and then we'll open it up to my colleagues. What steps do you think the Board of Elections should take to ensure it meets its November 28th deadline for certification of this November's general election, considering the large increase in absentee ballots from prior years?
Well, they're taking the steps actually, and it's increasing the number of people working at the sites, ensuring that the valid ballots are being opened appropriately, ensuring that where we have contested elections, that's being handled. What slows down the process, of course, is in the contested elections, you have poll watchers and you have attorneys who are there, who are observing everything and would raise objections, and that slows down the process. But we have adequate people on site to ensure that we're finishing and completing on time. While November 28th falls on a Saturday, and we may have that few extra days, we're using every moment possible to ensure that we are completed on time.
Thank you. In your opinion, should staff positions other than election inspector and poll clerk be filled based on party recommendations?
Well, we have the statute, the election law statute, that allows us to hire people based on that process. I think that we should still continue the mechanism of hiring people within the community because of the fact that we need a large number of people in a short period of time, and using websites and all of those things might just slow down the process of getting in as many people who require training to be able to adequately have the voting process run smoothly.
Okay. And many voters who attempted to vote early in this November's general election in Kings County waited in line for several hours. What can Kings County do to expand early voting hours, sites, and capacity at existing sites?
Well, first of all, you have to remember we're in the middle of a pandemic. So we have to be concerned about poll workers' safety and the voters' safety. What we did do during this particular early voting election, when we realized that people were coming in earlier, we moved the times that we opened up our sites from where we varied it because we thought we were helping the community. We moved it all to 7 o'clock. And so the sites were open at 7 o'clock in the morning until the last voter was able to vote. That enabled us to help a lot of the people who tend to come early. Then the site is open to accommodate them. It's I shouldn't say it's unfortunate, but it shows the tenacity of people. I found a lot of the seniors were very anxious to vote. And so while the site opened up at 7, they were there at 5:30, 6 o'clock. And that's just them. And if my parents had been alive, they would be doing the same thing. They'd be at that poll site at 5 o'clock, even though it opened at 7. But we recognized the need to open earlier, and we did it. And we probably will do the same thing again for the next election cycle.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else, my colleagues, have any questions they would like to ask?
Yes, Chair Koslowitz. Council members Traeger and Adams have questions.
Okay. Councilmember Traeger.
Thank you so much, Chair Koslowitz, and thank you for your leadership as always. And welcome to Commissioner Pepe Souvenir. I want to just state for the record that Commissioner Pepe Souvenir, as she was initially someone that we were interviewing and having conversations with in the Brooklyn delegation and beyond, made herself always available, accessible, answered every question, every single member who wanted to have a chance to speak, to ask questions. She made the time, even members beyond our delegation. And I want to just publicly acknowledge that and thank her for that. I also want to state that just recently, during the early voting process, there was a little issue with a machine in Coney Island, and the commissioner was made aware, and in record time, there was a response. Usually in the past, we had to wait a long time for a repair person to come down, but as soon as she became aware, they had sent folks down to make repairs immediately, and that matters because even the poll workers and folks said, wow, they never saw such a fast response. I just want that into the record, and I want to just acknowledge and thank her for that. My question today, and I think this is something Commissioner knows that is an issue that I care very deeply about as the only Russian-speaking member in the New York City Council, and as someone who has personally witnessed Russian-speaking voters, and not just Russian-speaking, folks who speak Arabic, folks who speak Urdu and others, but who have come to a poll site only to be turned away by an information desk because no one could help make sure that they identify their address and their election district to go vote. And I can't tell you the number of painful stories we've heard, particularly from seniors who face that language barrier, and no one could help tell them if they're in the right place or not, and we lose so many people. So an issue that I've been working on for a number of years is language access, to have Russian-speaking and other language translators stationed at poll sites. And for years, this has been a battle. The City Council, actually under the leadership of former Speaker Viverito and then continued under Speaker Johnson, helped provide funding for language translators. And the BOE, in a way, resisted that funding. Then the mayor created a pilot program with the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, and there's still tension with the Board of Elections. And now they argue that because the state does not mandate it, that's why they're not doing it, but there's nothing that prohibits them for providing additional language services. And so, Commissioner, you and I have talked about this at great length. Where does this effort stand? And I know that you've been very supportive, but I think it's important to get to the record the support for Russian-speaking, Haitian Creole, Arabic, Urdu, other critical languages that really reflect the diversity of our neighborhoods, and particularly in areas that suffer from low voter turnout because of barriers such as language access. So again, I appreciate your time and your answers today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Traeger, and I appreciate your comments. I'm humbled by them. Yes, we have had this conversation many times, and as a Haitian American, I understand the issue of language access. And as I explained during my statement, I was notified that there was an area where there was a language issue. And I immediately had them send people who spoke that language to that area because I know the importance of having language access. I'm relatively new. I just started. So the conversation of language access is one that I'm bringing to the table. And I'm pushing fervently for us to have that. I know that you've been working on it for quite some time, and I want to join you as being a commissioner and being at the table to discuss it and to discuss the importance of it and to show how it can affect the issue of voting in many communities. So I could not say to you at this stage where it is because it's a conversation that is about to be brought up. As I said, I came in the middle of the heat of the election cycle. So it was just concentrating on working on ensuring that people could vote, that we were keeping everybody safe during this pandemic, but certainly it is a issue that's at the top of my list. And you and I share that concern as well. So, I hope over time that you will see if we can make changes, if there's legislative changes to support us, that we'll be doing that.
Well, I appreciate that. And you have been a very courageously outspoken leader in this effort, more than many folks from the past, I'll say. In the Board of Elections, this has not always been an issue that folks have always prioritized, but you certainly have, and you've hit the ground running. And I appreciate how responsive and accessible you have been already to districts like mine that historically have been very marginalized and ignored. And so I really appreciate you taking on this role. This is not easy. This is one of the most critical functions of our democracy. And so I appreciate you, and to Chair Koslowitz and to my colleagues, I enthusiastically support Commissioner Pepe Souvenir for her dedication, her leadership, and I look forward to working with her on this issue and many more. And I thank the chair for her time.
Okay, thank you. I just want to add that I have 60,000 Bulgarian people in my community, and I have the same problem in the Queens. And with that, Councilmember Adams.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I could get into the diversity of Queens right now as well, but I will not chime in on that. Welcome, Commissioner Pepe Souvenir. It's a pleasure to be in your company today. We've heard so many great things about you, so I definitely celebrate your appointment as well. Just have one question along one line, because this is very, very important. It's a nuance to the BOE. Many city, state, and local leadership, community boards, and voters are very, very concerned about the Board of Elections preparedness with regard to handling ranked choice voting in the next election cycle, which is coming up very quickly on us. So I just want to get your feelings. I've spoken with others who are involved in Board of Election leadership, and I know that you're new, but on a scale of 1 to 10, as a commissioner, what is your level of comfortability with ranked choice voting and the mandate of the Board of Elections to serve the voters?
I have to say my level of comfortability, having spoken to my fellow commissioners and heard the conversations at the table, it's about an 8, 9 at this point. They recognize the need for, more than anything, education, educating voters, educating everyone about it, and are really ready to work with organizations around the city and the legislative bodies such as the mayor's CEC and the like, to ensure that we educate our voters on what ranked choice voting is. I'm particularly very sensitive, of course, to the immigrant community who may not be familiar with what it means. You know, every time I think of things and I do things, I look at it from the lens of my parents, because my parents, English was a second language for them. And I, being the first one born in America, was the American who could translate everything. And I understand that. And I recognize in some communities, they don't have that. They don't have a child or relative who could translate for them. And having information about how that's supposed to work, how ranked choice voting is supposed to work, is paramount to the minds of the people at the Board of Election. And so we're preparing, we're getting ready, we're working with, social media and all that to get the information out as early as possible. So I'm comfortable working together.
I appreciate your response, and just to put that again on the front burner, as I have with a lot of your colleagues, it is a grave concern because we speak about it out here, and we've got, quite frankly, a big question mark over the voters' heads because they're very concerned. Community board leaders don't know what this is, and as to up until right now, quite frankly, this has not been a priority for the Board of Elections. They've been waiting for the election, the presidential election, to get out of the way before focusing on this thing that is now coming at us like a freight train. So I'm going to encourage you and implore you to do everything in your power to continue to prepare your colleagues at the Board of Elections for this freight train heading our way. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I do recognize that. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Lance, do we have anybody else with questions?
Yes, Councilmember Rose.
Go ahead.
Okay. Hi, thank you, Chair. I was trying to lower my hand before Lance answered because my sister, Council Member Adams, and I are simpatico. That's been my issue, my overarching concern. I am so worried that that voters don't even understand ranked choice voting, and so Councilmember Adams, articulated my concerns. But I did want to ask you, since you recognize, and I was really impressed with your answers to the questionnaire, and you recognize that we need to educate the electorate. I'm really interested in how the Board of Elections plans to do that. It's one thing to say we're going to educate them, but we know I'm a chair of a committee, and one of the things the city does not do well is outreach and education, and making, information readily available. What steps is BOE going to take to actually educate the voters so that they understand this process? And I want to commend you for being able to be thrown. You are, immersion by fire. You have very little time to get acclimated to it. I was really worried. I had spoken with Commissioner Ann Taylor because she was filling both roles for Brooklyn and Staten Island. And I know how concerned she was about whether or not Brooklyn would be able to meet some of the challenges with, without a commissioner in place. And I want to say that, it's admirable that you were able to jump in there and expedited it and get things done. And when Councilmember Traeger has high praise for someone, all I can say is I can only co-sign. So I want to thank you about that, but I'm really, really seriously concerned about ranked choice and how we're going to educate the electorate, because most people don't understand it, including the candidates that are running for my seat. So thank you, if you could answer that for me.
So what I've learned so far is partnering with community organizations to get the information out, having materials that are in a basic language for people to understand. Once we have buy-in from the community organizations, and spending the time to really get them to understand the process. It's through those organizations that will help train the electorate. That's what we're working on doing, along with social media, along with literature, along with putting things on our website for people to have access to. So it's a working hand in hand with not only community organizations, but with elected officials, using everything in our power, because like you, I understand the concern of ensuring that people understand how this works. And it's not just for the electorate, it's like you said, for the elected officials as well. They want to be able to know that they're on a fair playing field with everybody else, and nobody is left by the wayside. So we're really seriously working on getting that information out. Yes, this election cycle was very different than what we normally was used to. We had over 700,000 ballots that we had to actually count, and that's what we're doing. And we have to be ready to have this information so we could certify everything to have the Electoral College sit of the governor to put the Electoral College in place. So there's a lot going on, but ranked choice voting is certainly at the forefront. It is not on the back burner at all.
Is there a timeline that, you know, is in place for when we're going to start to see some of the materials? And I know after the conversation with Councilmember Treyger, I know they will be in all of the representative languages that we have in New York City. But is there a timeline that, you know, we can begin to see this? I mean, because I was really concerned, like we had propositions on a ballot one election cycle, but there was no real education. And so that's how ranked choice voting got voted on. And there was no real, education around it. And even, the advocates didn't put any money into, advocating for it or not advocating for it. So I'm just concerned that we'll do it not in a timely manner where it'll be rushed and we'll be trying to get people to understand it and there just won't be adequate time. So is there a timeline and can we make it really soon?
Well, yeah, let's try to make it really soon. I unfortunately, because of my newness, I don't know what the timeline is. I know the conversation has been had. And because the concentration was on getting this out, I'm not familiar with the timeline. There very well may be that I'm just not familiar with at this time. But again, I can emphasize to you that it is a priority. We understand the importance of not only getting it right for us in as far as doing the election and being able to count votes, but it's also about ensuring that people know what they're doing and how they're doing it. And we do recognize that. So can I give you a date, a specific timeline? I can tell you that it is seriously being worked on.
Well, I just want to ask you to please, bring it up at the next meeting and let them know that there needs to be some expedience about this so that we can get it, expedited. The educational process is going to take a little bit of time because it is new. We used to have it through school board elections, used to be done that way, but they're not anymore. So people, I'm just concerned about how we get them up to speed in time for it to be, relevant for the election cycle.
Absolutely. It's not falling on deaf ears. Certainly your concerns and the concerns of many of the council members and even lay people is not falling on deaf ears.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And congratulations.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Is there anybody else that have any questions?
Not at this time.
Okay, thanks. And thank you very much. And good luck to you again.
Thank you so much, Commissioner, Commissioner, Councilmember Kausowitz. Thank you.
Okay, now we'll go on to the second topic. Now we move to talk about dissolving the Standing Committee on the Justice System and changes to the membership of certain standing committees and the Land Use Subcommittee on Zoning and Franchises. Pursuant to Rule 10.20 of the Rules of the City Council, the Committee on Rules, Privileges, and Elections can amend a rule of the council with the later vote of the majority of all council members. First, we will consider a pre-considered resolution that would amend Rule 7.00A by dissolving the Committee on the Justice System and transferring its jurisdiction to the Committee on Public Safety and General Welfare. The chairperson of the Standing Committee, Rory Landsman, resigned from the City Council on November 4th, 2020. This rule change requires a majority vote of all members of the Committee of Rules, Privileges, and Elections pursuant to Rule 7.70A and a majority vote of all council members pursuant to Rule 10.20. Today's second pre-considered resolution pursuant to that same power amends Rule 7.00A by changing the membership of certain standing committees and the Land Use Subcommittee on Zoning and Franchises. This rule change similarly requires a majority vote of the Committee of Rules, Privileges, and Elections pursuant to Rule 7.70 and a majority vote of the councils pursuant to Rule 10.20. Do any members have any questions? No questions?
Councilmember Rose.
Thank you. I just wanted to a little clarification about moving the Justice Committee into Public Safety and General Welfare. I thought that parsing, the justice system out from public safety actually made good sense in terms of the fact that we were looking at different criminal justice reform as separate and aside from just oversight of public safety of the police department. I'm just not sure why it's being pushed back into public safety. I think that they're very broad and both have enough substance and enough, there's a need for oversight of these two systems, even though they're symbiotic, but they are separate and different. I'm just not sure or why we're precipitating, putting it back into public safety. And if it's just because of the loss of the chair, I think that then we should look at finding a chair for it, not dispersing, with it. I'd like some clarification about why we're making this decision.
Who can answer that?
Am I out of order? Is that an out of order question for this format?
Councilmember Rose, you are not out of order. To provide a little bit of clarification, there had been a number of shifts in the jurisdiction of the committees during this term, including that there used to be a committee on juvenile justice, and that committee was dissolved, and then its jurisdiction was spread out to the justice system, and the justice system got additional jurisdiction. And the justice system has been created in the not so recent past.
Right,
And when the justice system was created,
right.
its jurisdiction was taken from public safety. So the jurisdiction is simply returning to committees that had previously had it. And where, for general welfare, where it makes sense from, since ACS is already in general welfare, now we're adding a second component to ACS with the other components of ACS so that they're all in the same place.
That kind of sound like double speak to me, but maybe I just think that the criminal justice system is broad enough to have its own, its own committee, and oversight. But I'm not going to belabor the point. I just wanted to know. I just want to make sure that those topics, those the very important justice reforms that we've worked so hard to get aren't watered down by being put into different committees that have so much to deal with that it'll just, I don't want it to get, the importance of it to get convoluted and overlooked. So I'm fine. I'm done. I just needed clarification. Thank you.
Okay, is that
So
anybody else?
but I won't be voting for that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else have anything they want to say? Okay, with that, I'm going to ask the clerk to call the roll.
Sure. Good morning. Still morning. Good morning, everyone. William Martin, Committee Clerk, roll call vote Committee on Rules, Privileges, and Elections. The items are coupled. Chair Kozowitz.
I vote aye on both.
To clarify, there are 3 items. There's Ms. Pepe Souvenir's nomination and 2 different resolutions on committee changes.
Okay, sorry.
No. Just want to make sure that all the members know what they're voting on.
Okay. I vote aye on all 3.
Thank you. Councilmember Chin.
Aye on all.
Okay, Jason.
Traeger.
I vote aye.
Adams.
Aye.
Matteo.
Aye.
Councilmember Rose, you need a moment?
Hold on.
Mhm.
I vote no on consolidating the committee, the justice system, and definitely aye on the reappointment of Commissioner Pepe Souvenir and for the other amendment to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Sorry, Jason.
One moment.
We're
Okay,
gonna
lady.
hold this vote open.
Chair Kozowitz, announce the results.
Yeah, well, we're gonna hold the vote open. You can announce the results, but we're gonna hold the vote open for the speaker.
Sure, thank you. So by a vote of 6 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, and no abstentions, pre-considered resolution in relation to standing committees and M257 have been adopted by the committee. And by a vote of 5 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative, and no abstentions, the resolution in relation to the absolving the Justice System Committee is also adopted by the committee. And a vote will be held open at request of the chair.
Hello.
Hello?
It's Corey. I'm here to vote.
Okay, I'm going to call on Speaker Corey Johnson for a vote.
I vote aye. Thank you, Chair Kozlowitz.
Okay, with this, the meeting is adjourned.
Hold on, Chair Kozlowitz.
Yeah.
Mr. Clerk, can you please announce the final result of the vote?
Sure, absolutely. Final vote, Committee on Rules, Privileges, and Elections. Pre-considered resolution in relation to standing committees and M257 have been adopted by the committee, 7 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, and no abstentions. And pre-considered resolution in relation to absolving the Justice System Committee is adopted by the committee, 6 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative, and no abstentions. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.